Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast. My name is Jacob Paveo, and I come to you from the Great White North each and every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What a week it has been. Obviously not going to be a much fun and joking around this week. If you don't do so already, you should be following me over on Instagram. I've been making a whole bunch of 1-minute reels, doing simple explanations. Obviously it's only a minute, but to answer the questions that people have been asking me, because a lot of people, not that people don't know what's going on, but they don't know the detail of what's going on. They're not following it every minute. I have not turned the news off. I've talked about recently, nearing my CPA exams, which is 3 days of 8-hour exams back to back at the end of May. So there's a lot going on. I basically just haven't slept between working on that, working on the podcast, and working. Things have been really crazy. And I'm recording this super early Wednesday morning. Last night was Biden's State of the Union. Unlike if you've been watching my Instagram videos, obviously in a minute, they're extremely scripted, and I try to make sure that I get everything done, and they're recorded over and over again to get every word correct and whatnot. Of course, the podcast, if you haven't listened before, is more just free talking. I like to just kind of discuss what's been going on. So not good, obviously, at this point. I was wrong last week. My prediction last Wednesday, I think I recorded the podcast on Tuesday, and my prediction was that Russia would take the eastern part of the country and leave the rest alone. And that seemed to have been the general consensus. And really, it didn't make sense from a military might perspective for Russia to do this. And it makes even less sense now. But we're going to get to that. But yeah, I was wrong because Russia has essentially attacked all of Ukraine except the far west. So the city of Lviv has not been touched. Odessa, as far as I'm aware, there's been shelling kind of near the city, but it hasn't actually been approached yet. Although the city just to the east of Odessa reportedly has fallen, although the mayor of the town says it hasn't, but on Twitter and Instagram, not necessarily Instagram, but Twitter and TikTok is what I'm trying to think of. We have seen video and photo evidence that the Russian military is just kind of chilling in the city. They're not actively fighting. So who really knows? It's still early. This literally happened within hours. So the far west of the country seems so far to have been left alone, which means that it's a place where a lot of refugees are so far. I think the number is 400. They're expecting it to be 500,000 individuals, approaching 600,000 by the end of Wednesday to have entered Poland from Ukraine. And that obviously includes Ukrainian citizens. But there are, this isn't like the refugee crises we've seen in the Middle East, because, Kharkiv, which is literally flattened today. I was watching horrendous videos from Kharkiv, which is in I suppose it would be the northeast of the country. I'm not sure, you know what I mean? Me looking at a map, I would say that it's the northeast, but technically, like, people say that Ontario is the east, but if you look at a map, it's fairly central in the country. So I don't know, but I would call it the northeast of the country. And the city's just been flattened, and they're absolutely destroying civilian areas, being investigated for war crimes and whatnot. So, but what I'm getting to here is the number of people displaced by this, because Kharkiv has a major international university, and the university was actually destroyed last night. University, by the way, that they were using as a morgue. So, I mean, it's so odd, the moves Russia's making. So they were attempting to destroy a police building, and they also took out multiple buildings across the university campus, which is beside the police building. And by the way, the police building is damaged but not destroyed by the looks of things, and at least 2 university buildings are completely destroyed. So Russia just earlier on Tuesday announced to people in Kyiv, as well as multiple cities around the country, that they would be using targeted strikes at military operations within Ukraine. And it's important to note that this tactic has been used by Russia before, when they were failing in Syria and in Libya. They did this. They stopped their ground advance, and really they didn't have a ground advance, not like they have here, but they stopped ground advance, and they just bomb and flatten a city, quite literally, by saying they're attacking military targets, and then they just flatten the city. Of course, Aleppo being the largest consequence of this, right? That is what killed Hillary Clinton's political career, were the actions she made as Secretary of State while Russia flattened Aleppo, and the U.S. did nothing. Honestly, it looks like that's what's about to happen again, certainly in Kharkiv. Kharkiv is being absolutely flattened. I was watching interviews last night with a family, and they actually shared recordings. Honestly, go on YouTube and watch European news on this, because the news over here just isn't covering it as effectively as I think they could be. But on YouTube, you can watch Sky News, FT, I think, which is French Today, DW, which is the German news network. They all have English news options, completely free to stream on YouTube anytime. Throughout most of the day, like, you can just turn it on for half an hour, and they just repeat the same half an hour. So I've been catching all 3 of those news sources, what they're showing individually. But as I was saying, this family had shared their footage that they took while they were leaving, and they're literally walking out of Kharkiv in the direction that they're, away from the Russian military. And as they're walking, like, a whole apartment complex just gets fucked up in the middle of the day. Like, it seems to be a cruise missile, because there's no planes in the sky. And yeah, just like obliterated this apartment complex. And they're just like, the family just stands there. Like, the little kids don't even cry. They're just like, they've been seeing this. And this is the fault of Russia and Vladimir Putin. And so one thing a lot of people have come to me about, because of course I'm a corporate financial expert. I'm not an economist, but I do understand corporate finances as well as individual financing, and I really understand the value of the dollar. I've worked in a company that does a lot of international trade. More than 70% of the business involves international trade, of course. So, I understand the value of the dollar and what the fluctuation can do to corporations and to businesses. And so a lot of people have asked about these sanctions. And I do have a 1-minute video over on Instagram about the sanctions that I encourage anyone to watch. And it's easy to share with your friends and stuff. Like, it's a very quick explanation of what the sanctions have done and what their intention is and how they are working. Because I've seen a lot of people say that, there's gunfire happening right now. these sanctions are not addressing that fact. Unfortunately, it's actually not true. A lot of these experts are saying it's not true. These sanctions are having a significant effect. So at the time I recorded my video, the Russian ruble had fallen by, I believe at that time it was 10%, but you'd have to go to the video to check. But today, the Russian ruble is worth less than 1 US cent. Less than 1 US cent. So I'm actually just looking right now to get the exact value. It's actually worth 0.0093 US dollars. And that is a fall from 12 cents. I actually changed workstations. I usually keep a calculator in front of me. And I apologize for not having my calculator. But I will get you divided by that. So it is a change of 63% right now that it has fallen. 63%. Oh, actually, oh yeah, okay. As of right now, a change of 60, you know how markets are moving actively. I'm like watching it change by the second, as if it's important to state that. But yeah, a change of 63%. It's fallen, the value of the Russian ruble. Now, imagine, I said this on Sunday on Instagram, imagine if you had an increased tax, let's just say, of 20%. As of today, 20% of your money is gone. It doesn't matter how wealthy or how poor you are. Every citizen in Canada, let's say, all of us have an increased tax of 20% enforced by Russia. That's what's happened. The rest of the world, well, not really, but the West, right? Because China hasn't imposed these sanctions, nor has India. But the entire Western world has imposed such strict sanctions that every Russian went broke overnight. Every single Russian citizen went broke overnight. Their money is worth nothing. Literally nothing. You may recall, under the Soviet Union, this is what caused the collapse. This is literally what caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. Was their dollar at that time, I don't recall the name of it, collapsed to be worth nothing. Because when your citizens cannot buy anything, and I mean, right now, obviously, the Russian market is closed. Even when the Russian market reopens, the ruble does not just spring up in value. It takes time, right? It takes a lot of time to come back. And Russia's doing what they can to stop the fall. It seems like, so what they've done is they've forced all Russian businesses to conduct 80% of their business in the Russian dollar because, surprise, surprise, they all switched and started using, because they always used US dollars, now they've tried to switch to the yen, the Chinese currency. Is that the yen or is that Japan? I don't even know. I think it's the yen, but I'm going to look it up. Yeah, the yen. So the crazy thing of all of this is people are saying these sanctions aren't working. The point of sanctions is not to remove the Russian military from Ukraine. That we can only do that with force, and we have decided not to do that. The West has decided not to do that. Instead, by literally removing Russia from the global economy, we have made every citizen broke, and this is a way of influencing democracy, something Russia has claimed to be for decades, which they are obviously an autocracy. To run in an election, you have to be approved by the government, and they only approve people who are going to lose to the person they want to win. And of course, when someone like Alexei Navalny gets through the system and they let him run, and then he becomes overwhelmingly popular, they put him in prison. And that's literally what they do. It is not a democracy. And this is a way of forcing democracy upon a nation. And it's a way that we've actually never seen before. And I'm surprised no one's talking about it, because it's a really, really interesting approach to this. We've never come across an extreme situation where it was justifiable to destroy an economy completely because of the actions of a leader, right? Whereas now it is. So we have unanimously across the Western world destroyed the Russian economy. It is not coming back. Their inflation rate is at 20%. This morning, the Canadian central banks announced that they're going to be increasing the inflation rate from 0.25 to 0.5%. And people are upset. Okay? Russia's inflation rate went from, I think it was like 4.5 or 5% to 20%. 20% blending rate, borrowing rate, which is their attempted rate of inflation is what they're trying to do. They're trying to stop inflation, rather, by increasing their lending rate. Sorry, I got my words confused there. It's absolutely never been done before, but we've now seen 10,000 Russian citizens arrested in the streets for protesting because they're all fucking broke. Could you imagine? I wouldn't go to work anymore either. If you were telling me, like, hey, we need you to come to work today, we're going to continue paying you your salary in Canadian dollars, and Canadian dollars are worth fucking nothing. You literally can't do anything with that money. You can't pay your mortgage because your mortgage is now costing 20% more every month. You can't pay your loans because they're costing 20% more every month. The only people who are protected are cash-strapped, exclusive cash people who only use cash, because your bank cards now aren't working because they've been removed from the SWIFT system, the Society for International Financial Telecommunications. And so it's basically, think of it as like an app. So a bank in one country can talk to a bank in another country. They've removed many of the largest Russian banks from that, and there's discussion now that the Russian central bank will be removed, as well as all other Russian facilities. It seems like that's what's going to happen if Russia chooses to encircle Kiev, which of course they have a 60-kilometer or 40-mile for our American listeners long line of tanks and armored vehicles and intelligence vehicles and personnel carriers and all that shit on its way to Kyiv. And it seems like they're going to encircle the city and act like this is a castle siege in the 1300s and just wait to starve them out, which is, of course, a war crime. And so I want to get onto that because there's been a lot of discussion about war crimes. And I want to start by giving credit, unfortunately, to the Russian military, because there have been reports of 2 different weapon systems that they have been using that are said to be illegal. Now, the first one is cluster bombs, cluster munitions. So the idea is you have a whole bunch of smaller explosive devices in a larger capsule, and you drop that larger capsule from a plane typically, and as it falls, it disperses bombs all over the place. Now, there's no question that cluster bombs are being used in I almost said Russia, in Ukraine right now by the Russian military. No doubt about it. There's video of it. The Russians haven't denied it. It's straight up happening. Now, cluster bombs are technically, they're not illegal in warfare. So the Geneva Convention states what is and what is not illegal in warfare. Cluster bombs are not a party to the initial Geneva Convention. I don't even think they actually existed when the Geneva Convention was last ratified. And the reason that, however, that many countries opt not to use them is because you're dropping so many explosive devices at once that multitudes of them don't explode at the time. So like the explosion rate of bombs depends on the nation. It seems like Russia's is pretty low, which is surprising, but there are a lot of unexploded missiles landing in Ukraine right now, and grenades and bombs and all that shit. However, the problem is that if you have a whole bunch of bombs falling that aren't exploding at the time, they're still live bombs, and they can explode at any time, and that's how you end up with, 5 or 6 years from now, a child is walking or playing soccer in a field, and his ball hits a mine, or not a mine in this case, but an explosive weapon that's buried 6 or 7 inches underground, or he steps on top of it and it's enough to trigger the explosion, and that kid either dies or loses a leg. That's the shit that we see across places like Vietnam. So 137, I believe it is, countries agreed in Dublin in 2018 to no longer use cluster munitions. However, the United States, Russia, China, and India all have not agreed to that. So it's not, Ukraine agreed to it, right? Canada agreed to it, but Russia did not. So it's technically not against the rules. They never agreed to that rule, so you can't really fault them for that. The other thing is the thermobaric weapon, which is what they're referring to as a vacuum bomb. So what this does is, at the point that it detonates, it releases a pure fuel-based aerosol, which then lights and causes an explosion. Now, when you light aerosol in any quantity, but especially in super large quantities, it actually takes the oxygen from the air around it, and it literally creates a short-term pressure vacuum that then explodes, and it causes a much bigger shock wave. So they are extremely effective weapons at taking down large buildings, taking out cave networks, taking out tunnel systems, because it's a massive shockwave that it causes. Now, soldiers nearby do have the air taken out of their lungs as it explodes. It's a horrible way to die. You get vaporized if you're in that blast zone, because the heat is extraordinary. And so there is there's literally no evidence that a person was ever there. However, these are also not illegal weapons. They're not chemical weapons. They are methods of standard warfare. The U.S. has used them in the Middle East now for decades against tunnel systems. The MOAB, the mother of all bombs, and the FOAB, the father of all bombs, which we've talked about on this show and celebrated their use in taking out a 14-kilometer long, I believe it was, network of tunnels that was used by terrorists in, I believe it was Syria at the time, and also taking out a guy who lived there, which was like a head of a terror organization using the MOAB. So they're just not illegal. So I wanted to put that out first. However, there's a lot of illegal shit going on. The Russian military has certainly broken military laws, and it's already been stated that the International Criminal Court of Justice, The Hague, who of course are the ones who charged all of the leaders of the Nazi Party that survived the war. They also have charged dictators around the world in recent years, including terrorists, leaders of terror organizations and such, for breaking crimes of war. And really, what we're looking at here, there are two things that are blatantly illegal that Russia has done. And the first is being the aggressor of armed conflict. You are not allowed to be a military aggressor. Now, we have not seen a superpower act as a military aggressor in a very long time. A very long time. Debatably, Vietnam is the last time this happened, and since then, I believe, is when the legislation was ratified with all nations agreeing to not be the aggressor, which means you cannot strike first. You have to allow the other party to do so. And typically that rule, what it's done over time, it's meant that yes, large countries do get involved in armed conflict, but usually it's because of attacks against them by smaller groups, right, who aren't a party to these laws. So what happened here is clearly not like that. We had essentially a civil war being fought. Russia was supporting the rebel troops fighting against the Ukrainians. That is not a breach of any laws and war crimes. You're allowed to send weapons to whoever the hell you want. You just, as the Russian military, cannot point them and just start shooting at someone who has not attacked you. But of course, as I said on the podcast, or I think I said on Instagram, Russia has declared citizens, 720,000 Ukrainian citizens in the eastern part of the country as instead Russian citizens, and claimed the territory as Russian territory because separatists held it, and simply and have stated rather that Ukraine started a war against Russian citizens, so Russia is moving in not as the aggressor, but in a defensive position. Clearly, that is not the case here. That is their defense. That is their rationale. If you watch Russian television, which unfortunately I have been, although not a lot, because it's really just makes you want to, like, it's crazy how you hear about, like, the brainwashing content and the spin that these sort of dictators put on things. But it's crazy that because, North Korea does not have an English-speaking news channel, right? China doesn't even have an English-speaking propaganda arm, but Russia does. So I can literally sit down and watch fucking white people who were born and raised in America talk about how Russia is, they don't actually say that Russia is right, but they're constantly going after American politicians, talking about how bad they are. It's pure Russian propaganda when they talk about, like, and when I say white people, I mean, like, I mean that in quite a they are racist way. Like, it is all the whitest fucking people you've ever imagined, and they're like, I guess they couldn't get a job anywhere, and Russian TV was like, hey, you're an American journalist who, can't make money. We'll pay you if you fucking say this bullshit. I don't know if they're drinking the Kool-Aid. I have no idea. But these people are insane. Like, the stuff they say is insane about this war and about how Russia's the victim here. Like, oh, muffin, like you don't have any money left. Like, go fuck yourself. Get out of the Ukraine and you can make your money again. Like, it's fucking insane. It's asinine, the shit that they're saying. But yeah, unfortunately, RT, Russian television, is still available here in Canada on YouTube. It's been taken off most cable network systems, and the CRTC, the Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission, is, of course, investigating removing them completely from Canadian television access as well as radio access. Yeah, it's crazy the spin they're putting on this. But back to the crimes of war. So Russia being the instigator is the first thing that I think will work against them. The second thing is so clear, and there's no getting out of this, right? The aggressor thing, like, fine. Maybe they can convince a court that they were convinced they were attacked in some fucking crazy way, right? Even Hitler thought he was under attack. Or claims that he thinks that. Who really knows? But fine. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. The problem is they're attacking citizens. You are not allowed to direct an attack at a civilian population. They're already being investigated for Syria and Libya. Now you're in a much more developed country with active, like, they have webcams watching everything, phones watching everything, and we've seen it happen. And what Russia is saying is they are only attacking military institutions, and when they have struck civilian populations, it was by mistake. I am here to say that if the Russian military is that fucking incompetent, we here in Canada should be in bomb shelters because they are so fucking inaccurate with their missiles. One is going to end up fucking heading north instead of heading west and going to cross over the North Pole and fucking hit me on the head because goddamn, like their accuracy literally is like a 3-year-old trying to fucking throw a baseball when they like put the ball backwards and it goes flying that way. Like what the fuck? There's no way. They cannot be that incompetent. They just can't be. Like, I mean, you watch Palestine, who are fucking a group of rebels using Russian military arms, and they can hit their fucking targets. You know what I mean? They're not even a formal military. They're just using the same equipment, launching it and hitting, or most get shot down, but they hit their targets in Israel. So now the Russian government, fully trained military who created the fucking weapon system is like, oops, it hit a building. Go fuck yourself. There's no way. I absolutely think they are going to be charged with war crimes. I think Vladimir Putin himself will be charged with war crimes. The problem is, what do you do about that? Because I don't think Putin is ever coming back to the West again. He'll be arrested on sight. He will never be welcome. There will never be a sit down. I would be shocked. He would have to pull out of Ukraine and start sucking dick. Let me tell you, like, he would have to suck Biden's dick and fucking Trudeau's and Macron and the new guy in Germany and Boris Johnson, and he'd have to go down on the chick that's running Italy and all this fucking shit. Like, he has done so much damage that when these charges do eventually come from the International Court of Justice, they don't have the authority, the court does not, to just go and arrest you in your nation. All nations who agree to the terms, which is literally everyone, are required to arrest you on sight. Now, obviously the Russians are not going to do so as of this point in time. I would not be surprised if things change. I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian population pull a King Henry and cut their wife's head off, okay? And by their wife, I'm talking about Putin, because he's a fucking vagine. I swear to you, I would not be surprised if Putin is killed, but it would only be by the Russian people, storming the palace and doing it like they did back at the end of the 1800s when they kicked in the rich people's doors, pulled them outside and murdered them and their families, on the front lawns. That's literally the only way it happens. Now, there's another interesting factor at play here, and it's China and India, because both nations have come out quite plain that they don't support what Russia's doing and they want peace again. They haven't come out against Russia, but they did not vote with Russia at the UN to veto in the Security Council the sanctions that the UN was going to place to stop the war. So, and people are like, it doesn't mean anything, like they didn't vote against them. No, they didn't vote against them, but it means a lot. It means a lot. What China is saying especially means a lot, because the Chinese government is straight up, they're calling it a war. And they're like, yeah, both sides, blah, 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 because that's the shit they have to say politically, but they're calling it a war. India has not, I don't believe, called it a war yet, but multiple top-ranking Chinese officials have said that they're trying to get peace for the war in Ukraine. That is huge. It's really big. And they don't mince words. You know what I mean? Like, it's not an accident. It wasn't like, the armed conflict. No, like the war in Ukraine. That's big. I wouldn't be surprised, because China is all about the Benjamins. And I mean that quite literally, the American dollar. That's what the Chinese people want, is American money. Xi Jinping does have a strong grip on China and the Chinese people, and they do follow him. For whatever reason, they support his government. Fine. The thing is, China will not cut a deal here with Russia because they are seeing what's happening, and the Chinese people will turn real quickly if they all have no source of funding. Because remember, the Chinese government supports a lot of the upper class in China. If that support goes away because China has no money coming in, that's a big problem. And they're looking at this and just thinking about money. China doesn't care about people. They have 1 billion of them. They can fucking replace the population of Ukraine. They don't give a fuck. The thing is, they like money. That's what they do. That's all they do. And what this is going to come down to is the West is going to tell China straight up, if China starts to kind of get involved, like, we will pull the plug on you as well. And China will go, whoa, just kidding, coming back. Like, please keep buying our cheap T-shirts and shit and our fake Louis Vuitton purses. And they'll apologize, and they'll be like, see you later, Russia. Because Russia, like I've said this so many times, it's so weird that we still refer to them as a world power. Because India makes way more money than Russia. They're way more relevant in the Southeast than Russia is in Europe or in Asia. Like, they're just way more relevant on a global scale. Their population is way higher, which helps to make you more relevant. And Russia itself was broke before now. Now they really have no money. If they want more weapons or ammunitions from China or India or the UAE, even these different allies, these countries, when are they going to get paid? It would be a donation to Russia. And maybe the UAE, just because they could fucking afford it because they own all of the gold. But, I mean, I don't know how you can... I don't think someone could convince me right now that China is going to full-on continue to support Russia when there is no financial benefit to do so, because that's what they care about. And they don't have any formal agreements to defend each other. You know what I mean? It's not like NATO, right? China's on its own. Russia's on its own. And in this case, Russia needs China. China does not need Russia. And China could live without Russia. The one thing is, China does not want Russia to fall because they, of course, share a border. They certainly don't want NATO on their border because right now the closest thing to that really is Japan. But, China's not worried about a NATO invasion from Japan because, of course, there's a lot of water and it's difficult to move a military silently across the water. However, they don't want a land border with a NATO country, which is understandable. But I don't think China's going to fall into NATO, or rather, I don't think Russia is going to fall here and end up in NATO hands. The problem that I see is Putin has forced himself to go all in on this invasion, which means the question's been asked of me 1,000,000 times. Yes, I think, or I would not be surprised, I guess is what I should say, if we saw small tactical nuclear weapons used in Ukraine. If it comes to a point where they are holding a siege for 15 days, 30 days, and Ukraine is managing to get supplies through in some way, like maybe they have tunnels that Russia doesn't know about, I'm sure they're already building them. Like, there's shit like this, right, that you have to think about. They're going to try and keep supplies funneling into the capital even as it's encircled. And if it's the case that they can hold out for a long duration, I think you're going to see small nuclear weapons used as a means of forcing them into an agreement to give up land to Russia and for Vladimir Zelensky to leave Ukraine altogether. They may kill him. I wouldn't be surprised, actually. I thought he would be dead by Monday. That was actually my prediction. I'm also shocked by how long they've held out, but at the same time, I'm not. Because you have to realize, there are 40 million people, roughly, still in Ukraine. Most of them, because most children have, or not most, but many have been able to leave the country. So most of what's left are individuals between 18 and 60, male and female, who now all have access to a Kalashnikov rifle and a shit ton of ammo and fuel for Molotov cocktails and all the beer bottles you can imagine. They are a fully armed society of 40 million people. Okay? That is way bigger than the entire Russian military. And man, there's no way they're able to hold Ukraine. They're just not going to be able to do it, especially not with continued support from the West for, because after they do take it over and they're trying at least to occupy it, the West is still going to be funneling money and weapons as best they can to these rebel groups that are going to pop up against Russia, and it's not going to end. 40 million people don't just decide that, as of Monday, they're going to start taking Russian lessons. That's not the way this is going to work. So the problem, like I said, is that Putin is all in. And I think that means he may feel forced to use his nuclear arsenal. If he does, especially over a civilian population, which that's the only thing that would make sense to do. If you're using nuclear weapons in this capacity, it's not like you're dropping it on a military base. I mean, at this point, there's only city infrastructure to target. I'm not sure how the West would respond to that. I'm honestly not sure how China would respond to that. I don't think it would be a good response from China if Russia used nuclear weapons against a country that does not have a nuclear arsenal. I think even China and probably India at that point, certainly Iran, would be like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? All of these major growing and already current world powers would suddenly they wouldn't side with the West, but much like how the Allies aligned themselves with the Soviets and the Axis, or whatever the hell they called themselves, the Warsaw Pact before it was the Warsaw Pact, in the Second World War to fight the Nazis, because they realized that the Nazis don't give a fuck and they will attack anybody. They want all of it. And that's when Russia, or at the time the Soviet Union, was like, holy shit, we got to fight with those guys. That's why they joined us. And it seems like now the Soviets are the Nazis and the Chinese are the Soviets. At the time, the Soviets picked the side who had the most money. They did it for financial reasons. That's why they didn't join the Nazis, because they knew the Nazis would try to overthrow them eventually anyways. They did not trust Hitler. And they knew for the financial well-being of a communist state, a fascist partner was not the best way forward. They thought a democratic partner in the West would be their best option. It's why it went forward that way. Well, now you have a Chinese communist country looking at what is more and more looking like a fascist Russian nation controlled by an the similarities are astounding, really. And it seems like Russia is hoping that the Chinese support them, much like the Germans thought the Russians would support them because they're long-term allies. They don't get along with the United States. They don't get along with Europe very well. But honestly, we get along with China much more so than the Soviet Union got along with the United States. They fucking hated each other before the Nazis showed up. The U.S. and China don't get along, but it is not like it was. There aren't guns pointed at each other anywhere in the world right now between the U.S. and China, the U.S. and India, India and China, the United Arab Emirates as well. It's not a thing anywhere in the world right now. They get along far better than the world got along before the Nazis showed up. So now if Russia escalates war to that level, if they use nuclear weapons within Ukraine, I think instantly that's it. Honestly, I think that's it. No one will trade with Russia anymore. I don't know how you scale down from that. I don't know if one of the 7 allied nations with nuclear weapons, that's the U.S., the U.K., France, Spain, Italy, I don't remember who the hell else they all are. There's a whole bunch of them, right? There's a whole bunch of countries that have access to nuclear weapons. And then, of course, China, India, Iran has a nuclear program. Canada could probably build a nuclear weapon within 3 weeks, to be perfectly honest with you. And we have all the uranium to do so. Like, if it got to that point, I don't know how Moscow survives that. I really don't. And I don't. And then the other thing is, like, because of mutually assured destruction, like, how do you scale back from that? It's kind of been agreed that, like, we don't use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear powers because that's unfair, and we don't use them against each other because then we'll just destroy each other. So what happens when one nuclear power does use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear or non-allied nuclear nation? Because, of course, if you use nukes against a NATO ally, like, holy fuck, you know, Moscow would be speaking English in fucking 10 years. And that's just a simple fact. So I don't know. I don't know where things go from here. I'm assuming they're going to encircle Kiev and try to starve them out. It's incredibly sad what's happening. The Russian people seem to either not know what's going on or be fucking pissed if they do know what's going on. Soon, the bodies are going to be returning to Russia, and they're going to put a spin on it about how the Ukrainians killed all our Russians and whatever, and we need to go in there harder, probably, is what they're going to try to spin it as, but I don't know if it'll work. They're certainly hiding the number of dead from the Russian citizens. They have not mentioned much at all other than the fact that there are some casualties. But, of course, the United Nations estimates that number is approaching 5,500, and they're assuming to take Kyiv, to take Odessa, especially because Odessa is right now super fortified, much like Kyiv, although Odessa can be attacked from the water, which won't help. But the Ukraine military has the capability to sink warships. So, you know, they are heavily fortified right now along the Black Sea in the city of Odessa. And then, of course, Kharkiv, which is starting to fall, but that's where most Russian troops have died. They think it's going to be about 10,000 Russian deaths at least to take these 3 cities, just to take them. Forget about holding them when you're going to have civilian groups that just randomly attack and kill soldiers, and all that shit's going to continue. Those body bags have to return to Russia. And when they start to do so, it's going to be a rough time to be a Russian politician, and I'm sure they are already scripting what they're going to say. Now, I want to close with something fucking hilarious, because I clearly support Ukraine 100%. If Ukraine falls and becomes Russia tomorrow, I will never call it Russia. It will never be Russian. It will always be Ukraine. It will be occupied by the Russians until they get their asses finally kicked the fuck back to Moscow. If they take an inch of NATO territory, as was said last night in the State of Union, NATO will fight with blood inch for inch. And when we say with blood, we mean with fucking nuclear weapons that hit their targets. We don't hit apartment buildings. I was saying this in conversation earlier this week. The U.S. drone system operating in the Middle East is responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of collateral innocent deaths. However, the one thing the U.S. never says is we accidentally hit that target. It was never a fucking accident. It just so happens that it was either the wrong people or the wrong people were in the area. But if we fucking blow up a car, we meant to blow that fucking car up. And when you're comparing Russian technology right now in Ukraine with what we have access to in NATO, I'm not even worried about being fucking drafted. How long would that war last if we really went to war with Russia? Not fucking long, because they'll miss all their targets. We'll hit all of ours. That's the way I'm looking at things. Anyways, the one thing I want to close with is this. Ukraine has held off a lot longer than anyone thought. So much so that Vladimir Putin had a pre-recorded speech that was set to air Sunday morning declaring that Russia had taken control of Ukraine and that their Russian brothers in Ukraine had finally been liberated from the whole Nazi regime and that whole shit that they've been saying for months. They had a pre-recorded message, and let me tell you, I laughed my ass off when I watched it because you can find it online. It was some journalists somehow got access to it and have posted it online. And it seems to have been recorded at the same time that they did the pre-recorded speech of him declaring war on Ukraine. So they recorded these two messages. They were like, yeah, we'll be in and out done by Sunday. Well, guess what, Vlad the Bad? It's fucking Wednesday and you're still there. And it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. So fuck Russia, glory to Ukraine. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. You can follow me on Instagram for a lot more updates and a lot more of those 1-minute videos coming. I need to get sleep today. Actually, I'm taking a nap. I'm up way too early. I need to take a nap after work. And then I might put up a video tonight on Instagram. Certainly I'll have more going up tomorrow and later in the week with updates. So once again, hashtag Putin is a war criminal. Hashtag glory to Ukraine. Fuck the Russian military. Fuck the Russian government. Fuck the oligarchs. Invest heavily in defense stocks. Pull all of your money out of Russia if you have any. I divested all of my assets last week so that I'm not even holding banks that are remotely linked with Russia, although now they can't be, but at the time they could. And let's fucking kick this economy down the hole like the Spartan did in 300 and watch their dollar fucking fall. Watch their people suffer at the hands of the man that they have supported for 20 years. Do not feel bad about the Russian citizens that have upheld this for 20 fucking years. Would it happen here? No. If we had someone who tried to run our country like he has run his, we here in Canada, you, my listeners in the United States, I once charted in Sweden, shout out to my Swedish listeners, you in fucking Sweden would not allow a president or a prime minister of your nation to run a country like that for 20 fucking years, 2 decades. He would be killed in the streets, and that is a fact if he allowed our economies to tank like it is. So let's allow him to watch his economy fall, and let's watch his people rip his fucking head off. Down with Vladimir Putin. Glory Ukraine.